All right, we're in Matthew chapter 6. I'm starting in verse 1. Are you with me? All right, here it comes. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So, one thing right off the bat, I think, has to be recognized, that Jesus talks about practicing your righteousness, doing righteousness. I think we need to recognize that we can't be considered righteous without the doing of it. That as faith without deeds is dead, a righteousness that is simply internal with no action, how can that be called righteous? If we want to consider ourselves a righteous man, a righteous woman, and we base that simply on the fact that we aren't carousing or a drunkard or whatever, that's not righteousness. Righteousness is active and doing, not just avoiding things. Righteousness is a doing. And so Jesus works on the presumption that his disciples are doing the work. They're doing righteousness, right? So the work does not make you righteous, but if we have righteousness, it would make us work, if we have true righteousness. All right, so I want to be clear. I want to have that in order. While I'm saying that we should be doing the work, it's not the work that saves us. But Jesus assumes that if we are his followers, we are doing the work. Now, he's going to tell us in this section about how we should be doing some of this work. But this first verse is just an introduction to living life as a whole. And so I want to just spend a little bit of time this morning talking about how we're supposed to be doing the righteousness. I'll talk first about the idea of reward. He says, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. Now, some people would make not a bad point, really, that we should do righteousness for righteousness' sake, that we shouldn't be looking for reward when we do what is right, that we shouldn't do a thing and then go, because there's something, it feels wrong about that. But while I'd say that does kind of look wrong, the idea of reward is not foreign to the Scripture or Jesus. In fact, Jesus is pretty clear that we should expect a reward when we are doing what's right. He puts it in front of us. The Scripture puts it in front of us. The New Testament in James and in Revelation, it holds out the possibility of the crown of life to those who have persevered. Paul talks about the crown of glory that he's looking forward to. Paul makes a good point about the difference between those who have who strive for earthly crowns and earthly rewards, when we ought to be striving for an incorruptible crown. And so this idea of reward is very much used by God to encourage his people and to motivate us. In fact, Jesus, just the chapter before, in the Beatitudes, it feels like he is putting in front of us possible rewards, and to the point where he even says, in verse 11 of chapter 5, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. So Jesus here in the Sermon on the Mount already several times has brought up this idea that we can expect reward for doing the right thing, for serving God in the right way. Now, as we think about that, and if we acknowledge that, everybody works for reward, whether you say you don't or not. Some people will say stuff like, I don't do stuff for the reward. I work just as hard over at my friend's house on the weekend when I'm not getting paid anything as I do for when I work at work. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean you're not looking for a reward. It doesn't mean you're not being rewarded. It's just a different kind of reward. You don't get paid at your friend's house, but you feel better about yourself when you do it. You would feel worse if you didn't. So there is reward, whether it be tangible or intangible. There's reward in the things that we do. We just are trying to differentiate between the tangible rewards and the intangible ones. But we are rewarded by our own feelings of well-being, our own some things we do, and we're like, I don't run for racing or whatever. I just run for myself. But not for no reward. You run because it helps you relieve stress, or it makes you feel better. It does something for you. Everything we do does something for us, which is a reward. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And so it's very natural and very normal to just acknowledge the fact that everything we do carries a reward. All right, so when we then think about doing our works of righteousness and how that applies, how the reward works there, we think about, well, it's worldly versus godly. And then we sometimes make it into material reward versus immaterial rewards. Things that are tangible versus the untangible. Intangible? Un or in? I don't know. Non-tangible. And so, but that's not exactly true, because that cut between those which are material rewards and those which are spiritual or non-material rewards, that's not really how it plays out, because the world often rewards us with just respect or honor or just the feeling of achievement that is acknowledged by other people, appreciation and things like that. They're immaterial and they come from the world. And God, all of God's rewards are spiritual, but very often they are manifest in material things. Your family is material, but the reward is spiritual in nature, but there's a manifestation in the physical reality of it. God rewards us by meeting our needs, and often they're physical needs. Don't worry about what you will eat or how you will dress or where you will live, that he would take care of all those things if you seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. I mean, the security is spiritual, but it is manifest in the physical reality by him taking care of your physical needs. And so it's wrong for us to think that the issue of reward is material versus spiritual. Because really when it comes down to it, what we are searching for in almost every circumstance is the respect, the honor, the acknowledgement, the reputation, in a sense. That's what we want. All of material things only represent that, right? Like we can acknowledge that the ribbon or the medal is not the reward that we wanted. It's what it represents, the immaterial things that it represents. That's what we wanted. And so it would be wrong for us to think that it's simply an issue of physical things versus spiritual things. That's not what it is. And it's not an issue of now versus later, because although there are crowns waiting for us in the future, there is reward for us now. Again, God hasn't left us so that we have nothing in this world. That we certainly get the feeling sometimes that, if you want instant gratification, you go to the world. If you want, gratification and happiness in the future, you go to God. But and while the second half is true, God's not involved in our lives in the present, in the here and now. He brings us joy and peace and love here and now. It's not a simple, the world is now and God's later. God's now too. And so it's the reward issue. So when it comes down to it, what I'm saying is the reward issue, you can get what you want, in a sense, from the world or from the Lord. Because what we want, like I say, what we want is we want to feel that honor, we want to feel appreciated, we want to have that acknowledgement, those kind of things. The world can give it to us, or God can give it to us. We can get it in either place. Don't worry, I have more. I'm sorry. The question is, who do we want to get it from? I mean, there is a world of difference between getting a gold medal at your middle school and getting a gold medal at the Olympics, right? Like, I've got medals in my house. If you wanted to do a race in the backyard and you win, I will give you a medal. Boom, it's that simple. But if you really have that desire to perform, to do your best, do your absolute best, and to be recognized, you probably want to take it somewhere besides my yard. And so Jesus says, be careful about doing your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. And so it's really a question of, who do we want to be seen by? Jesus is suggesting, don't do it to be seen by men. Do it to be seen by the Lord. And that can be difficult for us. I think we have difficulty understanding that Jesus is not saying, don't do your righteousness in front of people. I think sometimes we read this and we forget what we've been reading. We forget that we just read chapter 5, where Jesus said, let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. And we forget that we just read that barely a page ago, and then we read this, beware of practicing your righteousness before men, and we go, oh man, that means I'm not supposed to do things in front of other people that would make me look like a Christian or a good person. So, you think that sometimes we think that says, don't pray in front of other people because that's making you look like something. Don't praise and give thanks loud in front of other people because that's making you look like something. Don't do the works of righteousness in front of other people because that's making you look like something. You're not supposed to do that. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. Because if he was, he'd be contradicting what he just told us. What he's saying here is don't do it before men to be noticed by them. And so some would say, well, how's that different than just not doing it in front of men? The difference is David in the Old Testament. He brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and while the band is playing and the people are singing, he takes off his outer garments and he dances before the Lord in front of everyone down the middle of the street. And his wife afterwards takes him to task the way only a wife could do with King David, and says, how embarrassing you are. You would act like such a fool dancing that way in front of everyone. And his response is, it was before the Lord that I danced. And this is it. He was dancing not for anyone else, not to be seen by anyone else. It just happens that they were there. He was dancing before the Lord. And if you have a problem with that, he's like, not my problem. It was between me and the Lord. And if you don't like it, that's cool. You just close your eyes, I guess. But he was doing what he did before the Lord, and that's what Jesus is telling us to do. You can do the righteous thing, you can do the right thing in the same exact circumstances, in the same exact crowd. You could do it either to be seen by the crowd and lose your reward in heaven, or you can do the exact same thing for the Lord, not caring whether anyone sees you or doesn't see you. And there's a reward for that. And it's not as hard or as ultra spiritual as you might be afraid of. If you've been to a wedding, I'm sure you have. If you've been to a wedding and you know that there's that time when the newly married couple gets up and they dance, and every single person there is looking and watching them. But to that couple, it doesn't matter if everyone's in the room or no one's in the room. It doesn't matter if anyone's looking or not looking. They're only dancing for each other. And that's what Jesus is asking for. And as I get older, I think I relate even more to later on in the wedding when somebody throws on like the oldies and you see that couple that's been married for 40 or 50 years and they get up and they start shuffling and dancing, and they don't care if anybody sees them. They don't care what they look like. They're just dancing for each other. Everybody sees you, but they don't care. And that's what Jesus is asking. So this applies to all our lives. Jesus is going to apply it to a couple different places in particular. So I don't want to step on that yet, but let's talk about worship because it seems rather natural. Jesus isn't going to talk about that. In worship, like David, we have a choice between restraining ourselves because we're afraid of what other people will see or hear. We could sing out, but we think, well, I don't sing very well. I don't want to draw people's attention. Well, yeah, let's not be totally weird or anything, but sing out. Because we're not singing for a choir. We're singing for the Lord. And He's not uptight about what you sound like. He made you sound like that. It's on Him. So give it to Him. or you feel like standing up, or you feel like kneeling down, or you feel like getting out and dancing. And you think, oh, what do people think? What do you and the Lord care? Just take his hand and go. What if people see? Who cares? Why should we care? And believe me, we love you enough that if you get totally weird, we'll come over and calm you down. But you're a long way off, most of you. So far. But we have an obligation to the Lord to give him all that we have. And, if if you're in a relationship and, or if you were to see a couple in a relationship and, when no one's around and she says, I love you, he goes, yeah, I love you too. And that's fine when no one's around. But then when they're in a group and they're sitting at the table and he says something and she says something and she turns and says, I love you. And then he looks around at everyone else on the table and goes, uh-huh. Because he doesn't want to say it in front of everyone. Because he's afraid, what are they going to think when I say this out loud? Well, dude, get your head in the game. It doesn't matter what they think. There's only one person that matters what they think, and that's the one who said, I love you. And so either get it together and stop caring about everybody else, or get out of that relationship because you're not in it right. So with the Lord, when we come together, especially when we come together to worship, his Spirit calls out to you. Says, I love you. And then too often we do the look around and go, uh-huh. And that's not right. We should respond and not worry about what people hear or what people think. This kind of thinking has led people to this, secret Christian kind of thing, we'll keep our religion to ourselves and we'll keep our spiritual lives private and all that kind of stuff. And that's nonsense. Our spiritual lives are not a part of our lives. Our spiritual life is my life. Jesus is not a part that I can cut off and compartmentalize. It's everything. And it's not right for us to think that we would praise him, but only under the right circumstances and only in a hidden place. No, it's not right at all. So I'm encouraging us. Certainly, I'm encouraging us in worship, but I'm encouraging us across the board to understand this and apply this, that we were not asked to hide our Christianity or hide our spirituality or hide our relationship with Jesus. We were asked to not do it, not practice our righteousness, not live our spiritual life in such a way as to just impress people. He's asking us to live it before the Lord, in front of the world, but the Lord first. And let the world work out how they feel about it. It's not for us to worry about.